I want to talk to you about the suicide of Tribulation Trump. I know that that's the title, and let me quickly state to all the algorithm people in Facebook, Twitter, and all that crowd, I am not in any way projecting malice or wish or an attempt or suggestion of the death of Tribulation Trump. I'm not doing that. I'm simply saying that will be his only way out of the dilemma that he has found himself in at this present. There is no way that he can escape or return to the life that he once knew. And he will take the way out. That's what I believe. All right. So please do not make me a criminal and take me down off of Facebook for having said so. And I want to do something a little bit odd today. In the Manning report here, I want to read some Bible verses that I think are very important for those of you, because many of you are biblically astute. But before I read the Bible verses, I want to point out there are at least 3 infallible proofs that God is not Tribulation Trump. And I want to be able to demonstrate those to you unequivocally, that God is not with him. And these are infallible. That means they're unchallengeable. They're absolutely stomped down, absolutely in your face. Proof that God is not with Tribulation Trump. You might call him President Trump, and others might call him Donald Trump. I want to be able to do that. And I also would look at the fact that why there are more deaths in America than there are in any place else. We are on the planet, and that God's anger and wrath against America is running rampant. And then after that, with respect to Tribulation Trump, I want to compare Tribulation Trump to Jefferson Davis, because at present he is leading the South against the North. We have another civil war. And ideally, strangely rather, as the wounds have not healed between the Negro and the white man in America, so have the wounds of the South and the North have not healed. And so Tribulation Trump is he's leading the South in this civil war that's presently going on. And it's a major civil war that's happening. So one, I want to demonstrate that there are infallible proofs that God is not with Tribulation Trump. I want to be able to do that. And the other is, of course, I want to point out that Tribulation Trump, of course, is like unto Nebuchadnezzar and Jefferson Davis. Here, let me set this up, all right? And I want to explain to you why I believe Tribulation Trump will commit suicide. And even at present that he is flirting with it, that in his quiet moments, he knows there's no way out of where he's at. There's no way he can escape the excruciating punishment of his mind and spirit. And so suicide. But before I get there, I want to read to you a segment of Bible from the book of Daniel regarding Nebuchadnezzar. And then I'll let this be established as a basis for what we're going to say over the next hour, whether we talk about the Supreme Court and its decision on whether to allow Trump to escape having his records and tax forms or tax filings revealed, or whether we're looking at Paul Manafort's release from prison and Michael Cohen released from prison, or whether or not we're looking at Judge Sullivan's rebuke of Bill Barr, the Attorney General, who is trying to get Mike Flynn off scot-free. Hasn't happened as of yet. And also where we are presently as a nation as we're headed towards an election in November. I want to read these verses. I don't want to read from the New York Times, right? I want to read from the book of Daniel. I'm going to start my reading in chapter 4. And I think I'll start reading verse 27. And that's just a verse. But there'll be verses, you'll understand why. So be patient with me, right? Be patient with me as I read these verses. Don't run away because I pulled out the word of God. Starting at verse 27. and Mr. Engineer, just leave me here on the screen as you will. Verse 27, wherefore, O King of Daniel, chapter 4, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. Now, this is the power of Daniel speaking. Show mercy to the poor people and break off thy sins by the righteousness. And verse 28, all this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he walked into the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. And the king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? Nebuchadnezzar declares. And while that's what, remember now, we're talking about the suicide of Tribulation Trump. How many times have you heard him say that he has built America, the greatest economy that ever was, the greatest military that ever was? There's never been anybody like him. He is the greatest, 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 right? You've heard him say that, and he says it with such conviction of spirit, right? You've heard him say it, right? So let me read verse 30 again. And the king spake and said, is not this great America, make America great again? Right? Is this not the great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom of America by the might and by my power and for the honor of my majesty? This is what Nebuchadnezzar is saying. Now, these are the exact same modern day words. These are the exact same modern day words that Tribulation Trump says about America. Look how great. I'm the greatest. Make it great again. And he got all his disciples, right? All of his disciples declaring it's the greatest, right? So what I want to do is make a comparison between Nebuchadnezzar and Donald Tribulation Trump, right? I want to make a comparison. I've already pointed out how God used Nebuchadnezzar to destroy Judah and bring them into captivity, right? But it gets more enthralling as we go along. All right, verse 31. While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. This voice that came from heaven, right? The 7 times is the 7 years. And what God says to Nebuchadnezzar, oh, you think you were the one. Oh, you think you're the greatest. Oh, you think you're greater than George Washington. Oh, you think you're greater than Abraham Lincoln. Oh, you think you're greater. Oh, you think you're the greatest. Oh, you think you've done all this. Well, I'm going to show you who I am. I'm going to drive you out into the fields. And you shall eat grass like an ox. And you shall be there for 7 years until you recognize me as God. That's what the word says. And that I give power to whosoever I will. Verse 33. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar. And he was driven from men and did eat grass as oxen. and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair or hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the days, Nebuchadnezzar lifted up, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth were reputed as nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say unto him, what doest thou? Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Great Babylon. Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar used to bring the Jews into captivity. He died. Ahasuerus takes over. Ahasuerus dies. Darius takes over. Darius dies, and Cyrus takes over and finally sends the Jews back after 70 years, those 4 kings. But Nebuchadnezzar in particular, Nebuchadnezzar thought that he was the greatest that ever was. He bragged to everybody that, and Daniel kept trying to tell him, no, you're not. You're not. God is God. And God allowed you to bring the people into captivity. God allowed you to punish the people. God allowed you to go into Israel. God allowed you to break down the walls of Jerusalem. God allowed you to go into the temple and to burn it with fire. God, you're nobody. The raggedy prophet Daniel stood there in prison clothes and told Nebuchadnezzar, you ain't nobody. And the moment he said, the voice fell from heaven. Nebuchadnezzar, I'm going to send you out into the field to eat grass like an ox for 7 years. And you won't have the sense to stand upright like a man. I wanted to be able to say those things to you in a biblical context, why I believe that Tribulation Trump is going to commit suicide. Again, please be mindful. Please, everybody. I'm not suggesting that he does that. I'm not praying that he does that. I'm saying I believe. Do not impugn me for my beliefs. Do not take me off of Facebook because of my beliefs. But let's just look at something for just a moment. When we consider Tribulation Trump and who he is, he's like a Nebuchadnezzar, isn't he? Whatever you know about the Bible and Nebuchadnezzar as he comes into view now as the one who took Israel captive and the one Jeremiah prophesied about, Tribulation Trump, and a lot of Southern Baptists and others try to say he's more like Darius, more like Cyrus, but no, he's like Nebuchadnezzar. He thinks he's the greatest ever. And God has to bring him down. And the Lord will bring him down. There's no doubt about it. And I believe even at this moment that Tribulation Trump is flirting with committing suicide because of the reckless, and the reason why I believe that is because of the reckless way he's conducting himself. You know, he's not forcing the people around him to social distance. He's not wearing himself a mask. And just recently, Mike Pence and others who are probably scared as all outdoors have asked permission. Please, Mr. President, can we wear masks? Mike Pence, press secretary, has been diagnosed with coronavirus. And I think they're all saying in the West Wing, please let us wear masks. Please let us go according to the standard. I think he's flirting with suicide. I think the reason why he doesn't wear a mask, one is because it'll mess up his hair. And you know how proud that boy is of his hair. The other, it'll mess up the orange paint on his face. You might be able to see the discoloration of his face if he wears a mask. So I think that's one of the reasons why he will not wear one. But other than that, I think he's flirting with suicide. I think the boy realized the only way he can get out of all this mess he has gotten himself and his people into is suicide. I believe that. And he knows that there is no way out. There's no win for Tribulation Trump. There's no way that he can possibly escape what's happening now. He will commit suicide, and I think that when the Russians were coming in from the east and America was coming in from the west, from Europe, and Berlin was falling, that Hitler saw no way out. Now, some say he escaped to South America. I don't believe that. I believe he committed suicide because there's no way he was going to allow himself to be put on trial. And the moment the dam breaks in the false wall that Tribulation Trump has set up as the greatest example, at the moment all of that breaks, Trump will seek suicide as a release. And if he doesn't win the 2020 election, I don't even know if we're going to get there, then he knows that imminently he's going to jail. Right now, on yesterday was an extraordinary day in terms of judicial issues of the Supreme Court, the judicial issue of the Supreme Court. They remotely, by teleconferencing, heard two cases against Tribulation Trump. One was whether or not his personal records and filings of taxes can be released and can be investigated by the U.S. House of Representatives. The House of the Representatives are calling for his taxes to examine it, and he is, through court order, has fought it, but he lost it in the lower courts, the federal district courts, the state courts, the federal district courts, and now has found its way up to the Supreme Court to make the ultimate decision. That matter was brought before the courts. But there was even another matter that was brought before the courts regarding a criminal investigation of him by the Manhattan, New York district attorney, who is bringing a case against Deutsche Bank because no bank over the past 20 to 25 years have made a loan to Tribulation Trump except Deutsche Bank. All the other reputable banks will not make a loan to Trump. So it appears that Deutsche Bank has allowed Trump to do money laundering, taking money from Russian oligarchs and others who are sending their money through Trump's projects, his building projects, buying his residencies and then flipping them over and cleaning up the money. And so Deutsche Bank has got all of that, and Trump has called his lawyers to block it in Manhattan Supreme Court. Then it went to the federal district court, and now it's at the Supreme Court. So two of those cases were heard yesterday. Now, it appears that Trump has such a stronghold on the, if you will, I don't know if you want to call them Republicans or conservatives, but on a segment of the rebel South of America within the Supreme Court and within the Senate, that the courts may decide to not let Trump's records be seen. That, in other words, Trump is alleging, his lawyers are alleging, that while he's president, he is immune from investigation. He's immune from prosecution as long as he is president. Now, that wasn't true under the Bill Clinton event when Paula Jones brought a case against Bill Clinton, and that matter went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided under the Paula Jones event that Bill Clinton had to turn over the records of his relationship with Paula Jones, and the Supreme Court ruled that he had to give testimony and that he could be subpoenaed to give testimony regarding his relationship with Paula Jones. And everybody knows that he had the Supreme Court ruled to do that. But it appears now, and I don't have a crystal ball into this, but it appears now that the Supreme Court is going to rule differently for Tribulation Trump than it did for Bill Clinton. The possibility they may, if they say that Trump's records from Deutsche Bank, which is an entity, not a person, it is not, the second case that's brought by the Manhattan District Attorney is not against Trump, it's to get his records from Deutsche Bank and from Capital One Bank. And if they say his records cannot be seen, you cannot begin to imagine. I mean, we've seen a whole lot of stuff go on in America that is absolutely just unprecedented legally, constitutionally, and otherwise. But if the Supreme Court protects Trump in this, it's almost incredible to think where America will go from there. But that's what it appears that it's happening. Donald John Trump, I believe, as I read from the book of Daniel in respect to Nebuchadnezzar, that's who he reminds me of. You know, a lot of Southern Baptists and conservatives and many, you know, are out there in the ether of Fox News stating that God used Donald Trump and that he's God's man. But you know, God used Nebuchadnezzar as well to destroy Judah, to destroy Jerusalem, to destroy Jehoiakim, and to destroy Zedekiah. God used Nebuchadnezzar. He did. No, he did. And I'm of the mindset that God has used Donald John Trump to destroy America. Now, this you don't have to believe. You don't have to believe this. But God spoke to me and said that he's tribulation Trump. In other words, God needs an instrument or an entity to make the destruction of planet Earth happen, and that he's using Donald Trump to bring on the tribulation starting in America. And once America falls, everybody else just goes with the breeze. Yeah. And that when you look at Trump and all his support system, you're looking at God's anger and everybody who has anger against that followed Trump. The same way God used Nebuchadnezzar. So when Nebuchadnezzar captures Israel, a great nation, the nation of King David, the nation of King Solomon, then Nebuchadnezzar comes back to the Shushan Palace in Babylon and says, I'm the greatest. Ain't nobody like me. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest. And he talks about his God Marduk, not Jehovah God. The same way Trump says he's the greatest after he takes down America and takes down all the legal systems and takes down and escapes every court filing. He says, I'm the greatest. But then God comes to him and says, no, you're not. I just use you. And I'm going to show you that I'm God and you're not. And he makes him go out into the field. Let me read it one more time, because some of y'all might be logging on. Daniel said to him, wherefore, verse 27, wherefore, O king, let my counsel be accepted unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor people, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he walked into the palace in Shushan of the kingdom of Babylon, and the king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power? Now, that's just like Trump. And for the honor of my majesty, I did all of this. Nebuchadnezzar says, right? I did all of this, Nebuchadnezzar said. Verse 31, Mr. Engineer. And while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven. Now, Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon's a strange place. Remember, this is the same place we're going to now read where a voice falls from heaven. But remember the handwriting on the wall where they were drinking wine from the goblets of the Temple of Solomon, and the handwriting on the wall, many tekel many, thy kingdom has been considered and been judged, many tekel many. This is in Babylon, same place. The same place. I am speaking to you as the Lord's servant. I'm speaking to you as the Lord's servant. And I'm speaking to you as one that God has given an insight into God's use of Donald John Trump to bring destruction upon America, to bring the tribulation, the greatest massive killing and destruction that the world has ever seen, worse than the carnages of World War I and World War II, or Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm speaking to you as the Lord's servant. That I've seen behind, that God has allowed me to walk behind the curtains and to see, and told me 3.5 years ago, 4 years, to announce that Donald John Trump is named Tribulation Trump, and has given me the power and the courage every day. He's given me the courage every day to say it. He's given me the courage not to be ashamed, nor afraid of the faces of men, nor the power of the government, to say it every day. God's given me the power. Now, when Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm the greatest, Babylon's the greatest nation ever. And at one point you might say that because they'd conquered Israel, the land of David. And I've done it all by my might and to my majesty, and in comes God. Verse 31. Mr. Engineer, while the word, put it up, was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. That's what God's telling Donald John Trump right this moment, right this moment. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen. And 7 times, 7 years, shall pass over thee out in the field until thou knowest that the Most High, Lord God Almighty, ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, including James David Manning, if he chooses to give it to him. Several years ago, I watched a documentary of the life and times of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Texas congressman who became an extraordinary politician, who took the oath of the presidency aboard Air Force One on his way on a flight from Dallas, Texas, back to Washington, D.C., with Jackie Kennedy standing there with blood on her blouse because her husband had just had his head ripped off there in Dallas at the assassination of John Kennedy, and Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes president. And America was at some semblance of peace, but had entered into the Vietnam War. And as Johnson took over and the war continued, and Johnson got his own presidency, and the war escalated with General Westmoreland, and the television screens were filled away. Those of you who were around during those times, let me draw you up close. Have you seen the hospitals like Elmhurst here in New York, and some of the makeshift hospitals that they made here in New York City with Cuomo, and the Javits Center, or some of the hospitals around America where the hospital rooms are filled when people are being intubated, and the ventilators, and the people dressed up in all kinds of uniforms and PPE equipment and all that to try to protect themselves. Have you seen those scenes of the coronavirus? Think back 50 years ago when we were watching on the evening news the same kind of carnage of what was happening in Vietnam with the deaths, with the helicopters, and the men put the medics in the trucks with the red crosses on them and putting those dead bodies on helicopters, and the dead bodies that were ravaged with flamethrowers. Remember those scenes? They're eerily the same. They're eerily the same of what happened in Vietnam is eerily the same of what's happening in hospitals across America right now. Right now, eerily the same as what you see is happening in nursing homes right now. But the death of the coronavirus, the same thing. And every night, Walter Cronkite was reporting the deaths. The 58,000 people finally died before the fall of Saigon. And Johnson went on television and said, I will not seek the presidency. And if my party nominates me, I will not accept the nomination. Closed down because it tore the man apart. I mean, it wore him down. And Johnson and Lady Bird went back to Texas. And Johnson had a big ranch down in Texas, and he let his hair grow long and white, like a feather, and he didn't shave. And they were able to capture a picture of Johnson driving around in a 4-door convertible Lincoln, just driving around his compound like a madman. Johnson. Like he looked like an animal with the hair that had grown on him and his unkempt, the way Johnson looked just like the Nebuchadnezzar image. And not too long thereafter, the word came that Johnson had died. And he died because the weight of the Vietnam War had come upon him in such a way that he no longer wanted to live. I think he committed suicide. I don't think it was natural, but you know they would never report that a president of America committed suicide. And if Tribulation Trump dies, they will never tell you. If Tribulation Trump commits suicide, they will never tell you that it was a suicide. They will always say he just died. Even if we saw someone, if we saw him do it on national television, they would say, you didn't see what you saw. They would say he just died. So even if he does commit suicide, if he dies by way of suicide, they're not going to tell us that, the same way they didn't tell us about Johnson. But the weight. Johnson went into a madman's position because the death of all those young boys, and he couldn't end the Vietnam. He couldn't beat Ho Chi Minh. He couldn't stop. He bombed Ho Chi Minh City. He bombed every place he could bomb. He bombed the railway station. He napalmed them, and still the deaths of young men in America total of 58,000. Right now, today, as the 13th of May, we're at over 83,000 counted, recognized by Johns Hopkins University deaths. By August, we could be at 150,000. That's weighing heavily on Trump. And when you look at South Korea, who had their first death on the 3rd of March, the same day we had our first, or the first accounting on the 3rd of March. And throughout this period, only 256 people have died in all of South Korea from coronavirus. But because Tribulation Trump is such an idiot, such a degenerate, he would not take the advice of the scientists. If Tribulation Trump had taken the advice of the scientists rather than listen to Fox TV and Fox News and the pundits and the rednecks and the rebels saying it was a hoax and had taken the right measures, maybe only 250 people would have died in America. Listen to this. In South Korea, over the same period of time from March 3rd to May 13th, only 250 people have died in South Korea. But 83,000 have died in America. I mean, and all of those deaths are on the hand, all that blood is on the hand of Donald John Trump, Fox News, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Jeanine Pirro, Laura Ingraham, and all the rest of them, Bill Barr. All of that blood is on their hands. And the prognosticators are not making this thing look any easier. You know what they're saying? They're saying by August it could be up to 100. 2 days, a week ago, they were saying it would be 137,000. Yesterday, they kicked it from 137,000 to 147,000. By November, it could be up to 250,000 people that have died because Tribulation Trump thinks he's Nebuchadnezzar, or he thinks he's God, or thinks he's the greatest. Imagine this. Imagine this. His wife Melania comes to him and says, all these people died because of you. Or his son comes to him. Or his daughter wakes up and says, you have killed, that more than 250,000 of Americans have died, including children who are dying from strange diseases because of you, Trump! Because of you and your degeneracy, because of you and your ego. And the people in his cabinet are telling him the same thing. We blew it. But Nebuchadnezzar went to the field, and God whooped his butt for 7 years. The whole world watched Nebuchadnezzar, the so-called great king who said he was the greatest ever, had built Babylon by his own might, crawl on his knees like an ox and eat grass like an ox for 7 years and never got a haircut. All of Babylon watched him as Ahasuerus took over the kingdom. I said to you I was going to show you infallible proofs where Tribulation Trump, that God is not with him for good. Because if God was with him for good, remember when he said some time ago that this coronavirus back on March the 3rd is like a miracle, it's going to go away.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear. And from our shores, it could get worse before it gets better. It could maybe go away. We'll see what happens. Nobody really knows.
God knows. God knows. Let me say something to you. Sean Hannon, let me talk to you. A matter that is as crucial as this, and a nation that is as vital to humanity as America, God would not let something like this happen without giving his word to somebody. Jehoshaphat asked, is there any word from the Lord? Jehoiakim, the king of Israel, asked, of Judah asked, is there any word from the Lord? When Trump says nobody knows, but God knows. And if God wanted him to know, God would tell him. God would tell him. God would tell him. He says it's like a miracle. It'll go away. And he got these two clowns on either side of him. Monkey one, monkey two, monkey see, monkey do. These two Hamite women, right? Telling them, amen, it's going to go away. It didn't. God would not let him make such a prognostication, being such an important person in this time over such a great nation, as to say, I don't know. It's going to go away. God would never let that ease from the mouth of a servant, of somebody he was with. God would never let such be said of somebody that he is with. That's infallible proof number 1, 2, and 3. And of course, he said that, it's all under control at other times. He said, well, there's only 15 people sick now, and 8 of them are in the hospitals. 7 of them have gone home, and 8 of them are in the hospital, and they're going to go home. It's going to go down to 0. He said those things, right? And none of those things have come true. Just the opposite, in the most stark way, has come true. So God is not with him. There's one final thing, and then I'm going to take a break. Tribulation Trump is the Jefferson Davis of the America Civil War, because we're really at civil war. Mr. Engineer, Howard Stern made a statement that I have been making for quite some time. Maybe Howard's listened to me, and I don't mean to be cute. But Howard Stern is trying to tell the people that follow Trump, Trump despises you. Trump would not go anywhere near you rednecks. He hates you. Yet they follow him if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. I've said it. It hasn't gotten a lot of traction, but I want y'all to hear Howard Stern say it. And then we'll talk about Trump being the Jefferson Davis of the losers in this contest. Mr. Engineer, roll clip number 2.
Howard Stern is questioning who would vote for Donald Trump following the president's disinfectant remarks. The radio host made the comment while taking a call from a Trump supporter in New York who defended the president's Thursday remarks about ingesting disinfectant to kill the novel coronavirus. Here's the controversial comment as captured by NBC News.
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
Trump, after being skewered in the media, walked the comment back on Friday, saying he was being sarcastic. Stern's caller used the sarcastic line when defending Trump. Stern, a one-time friend of Trump who had him on his show a number of times before he sought political office, was baffled, saying, "What's it going to take? I don't get it." The host also noted that while he was watching Thursday's press conference, he told his wife he doesn't think there is anyone left who will vote for Trump. Stern continued, "I'm very frustrated. It is mind-blowing to me. We have such a disconnect in this country. This caller is saying he saw that and he's okay with it." The caller told Stern he was biased because he would likely support Joe Biden, to which Stern said, "I am all in on Joe Biden. You see the wall that's right next to you? I'll vote for the wall over a guy who tells me that I should pour Clorox into my mouth."
All right, so Stern is effectively trying to give a heads up to the Trump supporter. And here's what I wanted to say, is that Trump has nothing in common with the people that support him. They are not of the same kindred. They don't have the same culture. Trump and the people that support him are culturally mutual. Trump does not like their music, nor their food, nor their religion, nor their ethics. It is absolutely amazing that they are with him. And the reason why is that he has told them that he is for them. He has duped them. And it's a very, very long story to actually take a look at. But at any rate, I thought it would be important for us to point that up, that as we conclude this whole segment about Nebuchadnezzar, read that segment of Daniel's chapter 4 about Nebuchadnezzar and Trump. Yeah, God is using him, but God is using him to destroy America. And then once God destroys America, God is going to destroy Trump. God told me. I don't have to say like Trump, nobody knows. I know that he is the trigger of the tribulation. I'm James David Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant. Hallelujah. Goes right there. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.